On today's Locked On Jayhawks, is this the most important Big 12 tournament in the Bill Self era? Some more Hunter Dickinson talk as he undergoes his shoulder injury. And we'll finish up with whose stat line is it anyway.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. Find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio. He's Nick Schwert at Nick_Schwert on Twitter. And on today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks, which you can listen to for free anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. Thank you for making it your first listen every day. We are going to be talking Big 12 tournament. Is this the most important Big 12 tournament of Bill Self's tenure at KU? Some Hunter Dickinson talk and whose stat line is it anyway for Kansas moving forward. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little bit further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them out today at nissanusa.com. So joined by Nick today, and normally when we get to this point of year with the Big 12 tournament, it's the conversation of, does this even matter? Like, what do they have to play for? They're going to be a 1 seed anyway. Should they even care about this? Now it's like, oh, you know, depending on how you do, you could be a 2 seed, you could be a 3 seed, you could be a 4. I don't know if Kevin McCullar and Hunter Dickinson are hurt. Would it be crazy if the tournament committee was like, yeah, we're going to dock you a little bit. You're going to be a 5 seed. Like, dare we say that in the Bill Self era? So I guess there's two ways going to this, because on that standpoint, like, there is more to play for KU in this Big 12 tournament than a lot of other ones. But on the flip side, with the injuries that KU has, you could still make the argument that, yeah, they shouldn't care about this at all. Just get everybody healthy for the NCAA tournament. So where do you kind of lie on the importance of this Big 12 tournament to this year's KU team?
Well, I think it depends on the situation with Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullar. If both of those guys, like, let's just say theoretically, they get cleared to play, they are able to go. There is no risk of them being re-injured. If it's just like hey, do you want to push it? What's the point? That's different than just saying, hey, these guys can't play. Because if they can't go, let's imagine KU's coaching staff is going into this week saying, no Kevin, no Hunter, our 2 leading scorers, our 2 best players, some would argue. I'm thinking, can we get out of this week without anybody else being injured? Like, what would it look like, hypothetically, if we gave Charlie McCarthy and Wilder Evers a little extra run? Just see if, how much juice is in those tanks. Because at this point, I'm kind of operating under the assumption, like, it's pets heads are falling off mode, Derek. So I'm like, nobody. Like, can we just keep Furphy healthy? Can we make sure DeJuan doesn't get injured? Because what happened in that Houston game, Kevin with the knee, Hunter Dickinson with what looked like a dislocated shoulder, I thought the season was over. Like, that felt like, okay, we've went through all of this drama. We've went through all of these ups and downs with this team all season long, especially with Kevin and the knee. It's just been back and forth. This team looks good. This team looks like they're pretty average. In that moment, in the midst of what was an absolute boat race down in Houston, I thought, okay, I'm done. We're done here. Like, we're just going through the motions. And now, sitting here on a Monday night, not knowing what those guys' statuses are going to be into the tournament, like, I can't get any lower than I am right now in terms of my KU optimism. So let's not push our luck this weekend. I don't think this team has a great chance of going on a run in March anyway. They certainly won't if you're pushing guys to the limit, or if there's anybody else that has a nagging injury that we don't know about. It's not happening. You're not winning the Big 12 tournament. You maybe win a game, maybe 2, but I don't think this team's seed line is going to be affected based off what they do this week in Kansas City. I'll say this, Derek. You mentioned 2 seed.
That would take winning the Big 12 tournament. That would take winning the Big 12 tournament.
I don't even know if that's enough, frankly. If this team winds up on the 2 line, the committee, we have to reevaluate like how we're doing this stuff, because I get it, resume versus who the best teams are. There's no way, and I know we watch more KU than we do anybody else. There is no way you can convince me this is a team with like a top 8 resume in college basketball.
Sure. But I think that's the beauty of Bill Self, right? There are other years. I think back to the 2015 year where they got kind of beat up by Wichita State in the second round. That team was realistically, they played like a 4 seed. You know, they got a 2 seed because of the resume and because of Bill Self, right?
Okay, can we call timeout really
does.
quick? I'm calling a timeout, and this also serves as a technical foul for me.
Okay.
I was negative last week. I'm starting off first 5 minutes of this episode negative. We're going complete tone shift the rest of the episode. I'm going to be positive. I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to be glass half full. So hold me to that, please.
Okay. Well, then how about this for a scenario? What is like the ideal scenario this week for KU? Because the ideal realistic scenario, I guess, because I agree with you. I don't think it's realistic without knowing right now, because like you said, we're recording this on Monday night, without knowing the status of Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullar, probably not realistic to expect them to win the Big 12. But like, you have to acknowledge there is a certain level of, as much as I agree with you, you don't, if Kevin McCullar and Hunter Dickinson are 50-50, you don't mess with it. You prefer to have them for the NCAA tournament. There is still a level of, this team has been so up and down. This team has not won more than 2 games in a row in the calendar year of 2024. You need to show you can win games at some point. Like, you need to build confidence. You need to win games. At the end of the day, that does matter. So, like, the ideal scenario isn't losing in the first game so that you have extra days to rest up. What is the ideal scenario of what could happen this week in Kansas City?
Well, I think I'm thinking about more of the players, the guys, than I am the results. I want to see who's going to rise to the occasion of your 2 go-to offensive creators are out. So DeJuan, Johnny, KJ, you guys can't just be the same guys that you've been all season. Someone or multiple guys are going to have to step up and look at this week as an opportunity to say, okay, Kevin's out, Hunter's out, it's my turn. Like, I'm ready. Pass me the torch. Like, I can do this. I can take over. I can be the number 1 option. I think the obvious guy for that, Derek, is Johnny Furphy. Like, he's the next best player. He's probably going to be playing for the Toronto Raptors at this time next season. I don't know what the mock drafts have him at, but this is your opportunity to say, okay, right, you're getting first round love. You're getting some lottery love. Go out and show it. Like, for him, selfishly, he can make himself a lot of money over the next 2 weeks, especially with those 2 guys sidelined. But I think that's a trickle-down effect, because it's not just like Johnny Furphy leads Kansas to the Big 12 championship game. It's, okay, Johnny steps up now. Who fills his role as like being this ancillary scoring option? Maybe that's Nicholas Timberlake. Maybe that's Elmarco Jackson, right? Like, all of these guys now get to step up a rung or 2 rungs in terms of their role, in terms of their opportunity. Like, we've been talking all season about the bench minutes, who's going to rise up between Timberlake and Elmarco and even Jamari McDowell. Hey, here's your opportunity to solidify a role in March. And you can do it. Like, we talk all the time, regular season, has this player turned a corner? Has that player turned a corner? Usually it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Like, Nicholas Timberlake's had a few nice games, and yeah, you could say he's gotten a little bit of a bigger role, but in terms of the pecking order on this team, he's still, 5th or 6th option in terms of scoring. Not if you do it in March, right? You do it in March with 2 guys are out. All of a sudden, NCAA tournament next week, you're going to give yourself the best chance to win. What is the best version of ourselves? And so, in a weird way, we saw this for a few minutes in Houston, and it did not look pretty. Granted, game was already out of hand. Like, that was just different set of circumstances. That thing was just kind of snowballing out of control for the team all day long. But this week, it's free and easy. Nobody's looking over their shoulder. Nobody's wondering if they're going to get yanked. You all have an opportunity. And if somebody seizes it and really has a breakout performance in Kansas City, they could be doing themselves a huge favor heading into the NCAA tournament.
Let's say Dickinson and McCullar are out for their opening game at the very least. Does Michael Jankovic get minutes? Like, real minutes?
Okay, real minutes.
Yeah.
See, that's so. I mean, how many guys would you have to get through before? Because it's not just, will Jank get minutes? It's who's playing like crap, like who's playing terribly to the point where you're.
Well, actually, let me rephrase. Jank. Who has a better chance to get minutes? Would it be Michael Jankovic or Dylan Wilhite? Because then your big men left without Hunter would be Parker Brown, KJ Adams?
Yeah, that's
trouble for one of them.
Yeah, that's what's crazy. That's what's crazy is, okay, do you think
burn the red shirt on Zach Clements this late in the year?
Do you think Parker starts, or do you think KJ starts at the 5?
You know what? Let's get into this coming up because I actually wanted to kind of talk a little bit about this as it pertains to Hunter Dickinson. So we'll take a quick time out and then get to that with Locked On Jayhawks. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drivers and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. With the 2024 Rogue, it is perfect for mid-size crossover for your next adventure. You can also check out the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. Has room up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced capability with 4x4 capability, with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. And again, that is with Nissan, NissanUSA.com. All right, so we were just talking about KJ Adams a little bit there, and do you start him at the 5? So I think with Hunter Dickinson, I don't know, his almost feels more, his injury feels a little more black and white to me than Kevin McCullar's. Like once we find out what it is, you're either out for the season or you're going to be fine, basically, right? It was a clean pop in and out, maybe. With Kevin, it feels like we've been on kind of the roller coaster, but that's neither here nor there. If Hunter Dickinson is out, it feels like he would be out for good, seemingly to me. I don't know, whatever ends up happening. So do you go with KJ Adams at the 5? Do you go with Parker Brown at the 5? Well, I think I would go with KJ at the 5 because think about it. What have been some of the biggest problems that this team has had, some of the biggest flaws that this team has had? We've talked about this. It's the roster construction flaw of basically having 2 big men, where you saw the one screenshot going around on social media, I'm sure, of Hunter Dickinson catching the ball in the post, and all 5 Houston players are within a step of basically the lane or the free throw line, where it's like there's no spacing out there. And it's not that it would be completely solved, like how much would teams still respect or disrespect like some of your shooters on the outside? That remains to be a question. But having an extra guard out there, just having the potential of somebody else who can shoot. And defensively, we know KU has struggled against ball screens. We know KU has struggled against teams who can space you out. We know KU has struggled against teams who can basically shoot a lot of threes. And I think if you're playing KJ at the 5, it at least, even though you're going to lose some on offense, it's going to help with that. But even me all saying that, like, I think we because Hunter Dickinson is so skilled offensively, we like to get to the point where it's like, oh, if you have KJ Adams at the 5, you know, the offense is just not going to be nearly as good as it was with Hunter Dickinson at 5. Okay, but it's not like the offense has been great. The offense ranked like in the mid-40s on KenPom, you know? So I would personally go with KJ at the 5. But that being said, I feel like Bill Self would go with Parker Brown.
So you, at the beginning of your answer, you said, I feel like I would go with KJ at the 5, and here's why. And then you gave, a really good explanation. I'm going to do something similar. I would go with KJ at the 5 as well, because he's way better than Parker Brown. Yeah. There's my explanation. Like, he's just better, Derek. Yeah. I know, like, KJ's, we always joke that, like, the better KJ's playing, the taller he gets in our heads. But when he's playing poorly, it's like, well, he's 6'2". What do you want him to do out there? He's a 6'2", 5 man. So he's trying his best. I don't know if I'm excited per se, but I'm interested to see stylistically what changes specifically with Hunter out. Like, we've seen Kevin out plenty. And like, not even really about like who's going to be taking the shots, who are they running offense for, but the one negative, or I think to me, the biggest knock against Hunter is he's slow. Like, he's not just, we talk about big guys who can stretch the floor. He just doesn't move well. He's a tremendous player, but things can kind of get stagnant with him, especially the way you're feeding him, post opportunities. Those are just kind of clunky plays. He just happens to be better at them than everybody else in college basketball. You put KJ out there at the 5 in a lineup with DeJuan, Furphy, who knows, El Marco, or Jamari, and Timberlake. You got 4 guards. You're running, you're gunning. Now, just because you're running and gunning doesn't mean you're knocking down shots. But like, that brand of basketball is much, much different than the one that they've played. And I would guess, and I'd be curious to get your take on this as well. I would guess going into this tournament, with everything that's taken place this season and with those two guys potentially being out for this week, if not longer, I would assume Bill Self is not going into this in like drill sergeant mode. And I mean that for the tournament, the postseason in general. I mean, like, he's going to be telling these guys, hey, it hadn't been a great year. Nobody expects you to do anything. Two of our best players are out. What do you have to lose? Right. And maybe they just aren't good enough to like overcome their shortcomings, but there's part of me that just wonders, like, what if that can open things up a little bit? Not to the point of like a Final Four run, but what if that can open things up where all of a sudden, you know, Elmarco Jackson's out of his head a little bit. Nicholas Timberlake's just out there playing his game, knocking down shots. Furphy's doing his thing in transition. We know what DeJuan and KJ kind of are at this point, but I don't know if it's a better brand of basketball, but it's certainly a different brand of basketball. And the one that they've been playing all season has been pretty hit or miss. Maybe there's some juice to whatever they're bringing to the table in KC.
Right. And like, I'm hesitant to say it's going to give them a chance to be better, because that sounds ludicrous. Oh, you could be without, you know, two All-American. I think more specifically, though, for me, it's less about possibly losing Hunter, which I know we had a conversation about this last week of building the roster for next offseason. I'll be completely honest, man. I'm kind of starting to waver to a point where I'm like, give me KJ coming back instead of Hunter if you had to choose between one of the two. And just play, you know, you give KJ Adams 25 minutes per game as a 5, and you let Flory Badunga, your 5-star big man, play 15 minutes per game as the backup 5. And if it's a game where you're playing against another true big man where you need, you know, more of the true guy, then maybe it's 20-20, whatever it is. I just feel like the defensive side of the ball, even though it's rated higher than the offense, is something where if you're not going to be a great offense, you better be an elite defense, you know? And I think, even though KJ does not give you like great rim protection, Hunter wasn't a great shot blocker anyway. So wouldn't you rather have the defense that can switch 5, that can get out to ball screens better, that can defend threes better than they have kind of this season? And so I do think there is a part of me that thinks this almost gives them if you don't have Hunter Dickinson for the NCAA tournament, I almost feel like you have a better chance of making a second weekend or making an Elite 8 in a weird way, because you're more matchup proof. But you also have a worse chance of making a Final Four or something like that because you don't have the star power. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think the problem that I would have in just like the lead up to the season or getting my hopes up is, I get the pieces are different, but in some respects, they'd be very similar to what we saw last year when this team got outclassed by Arkansas. Where was that at?
Didn't have Bill Self in the tournament, though.
Yeah, but like, come on. That was not a team that people were thinking was going to go on a Final Four run.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you see what UConn did in the tournament to be like, even if they get by Arkansas, it's hard to be like, well, they would have got through you know.
Yeah, so I don't know, man. I just KJ is such an interesting player because he does everything you want him to do in terms of like ball movement, like probably not a better passing big man. He has improved offensively. He's still very limited, like we all know that. But in terms of just knocking down those little floaters, and he's great in transition and finishing above the rim, like there's a lot to like. There's a lot to like. But at the end of the day, he is 6'5". He's a power forward who can't space the floor. And he's not a great defender either. It's like, oh, like, yeah, you could psych yourself into him being like a mini Draymond Green. Well, Draymond Green's one of the best defenders in the NBA. So like there has to be more than one thing to hang your hat on when you have all of these characteristics that are not prototypical of a player at your position. And it just becomes increasingly difficult because if I told you this, if I was like, hey, what's the perfect lineup around KJ Adams? Let's just say KJ is a non-negotiable. He is going to be in the starting 5 next year. What is your ideal lineup that you're going to put around him? And you can answer that if you want, but I think the issue is that if I gave you 3 or 4 or 5 other like different types of big men, it would be easier to come up with more options. There isn't just a finite number of options on how to build a championship caliber team around him. And with KJ, I just feel like the options out there are very limited, and that makes it increasingly difficult to try and build whatever your ideal roster is around him.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I think it just opens you up to play a style of basketball. If you can get another scoring guard in there running a bunch of the pick and rolls, the switch ability on defense, if you get the shooting around it, I think it can be deadly, especially if you have a good big man coming off the bench that you can switch styles to, which, they're going to have a top 10.
Is there a chance? Hey, is there a chance? I know you don't want to get probably too ahead into next season, but like, is there a chance that if I gave you Hunter Dickinson, KJ Adams, and Flory Badunga, that like the freshman would be the best option, that he might be the easiest player to build around next season?
I mean, it's possible, but like we've gone through this before with freshmen coming in, the hype is always so high. How often do those guys live up to that? And how often it's honestly probably a bigger rate of guys who struggle in year one. And when I look at Flory Badunga, I see a center who's like 6'8" with an insanely big wingspan, like a 7'4" wingspan, who's got an insanely high motor, who can't really shoot it, who doesn't have a refined offensive game yet, but he's a good shot blocker and rebounder. And when I think of all those things, you know what other center I think of who was a freshman one and done at Kansas? Shek Diallo. And he didn't really get on the court much at Kansas.
Or Cliff Alexander, take your pick. Here's the problem with what you just said. Are you already putting Flory Badunga on portal watch? Like, are we already worried about this guy leaving after his freshman year? Because you didn't actually paint a very rosy picture.
No, I actually don't know. I've heard some stuff from recruiting people that there is maybe more of an expectation there to be a multi-year player. So I don't know. You never know for sure.
Hey, Ernest Uday was a multi-year player too, bub.
Yeah, and Ernest Uday, I know for a fact was coming in with the idea of being a one and done. So you never totally know where things go with that, but I don't know. It's almost at this point, I'm not even going to project if a player wants to stay or is going to stay more than a year because it's an impossible thing to figure out.
Can we
let's finish up?
All right, fine.
Okay. No, if you have one more thought, it better be worth it.
It's like we had Joel Embiid. He was like the one freshman big guy that Bill Self brought in that was just aces from day one. And then he like broke his foot and his back with a month to play. And we were robbed of whatever that would have brought. And since then, all the McDonald's All-American big guys we brought in, like, you're flunking out. We're flunking with big. I just want one guy to come in and hit the ground running.
All right, let's finish up. Whose stat line is it anyway? First, this episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. So you don't have to worry about, I didn't get the first round pick right, so now I'm not going to get any points in the second round. Well, guess what? With FanDuel, you can just bet on every round. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Same game parlays. You want to pick who's going to make the Final Four. Right now, if you're still a believer in Kansas to make the Final Four, plus 700. How about some other Big 12 teams, though? You got Iowa State at plus 550. Baylor is going off at plus 800. Texas at 22-1. I don't even know if they're going to make the tournament, but whatever. You can bet on them and plenty others with FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. FanDuel, an official sportsbook of Locked On Network. Let's finish things up here with some whose stat line is it anyway. I only have one question for you today, and it's a simple one, but it requires 5 answers. So Hunter Dickinson.
Sounds really simple.
I know, right? Basically, this is what is the best 5-man lineup, according to net rating, that Kansas has shown that does not include Hunter Dickinson on the court? Because they might be without Hunter Dickinson. Now, this is a small sample size. I will tell you that. So, you don't want to read into it too much necessarily. But if you would like to take a guess, what is the best 5-man lineup that does not include Hunter Dickinson this year?
So my instant reaction would be that maybe there were some games early when like KU was racking up impressive wins in the non-con when they were beating, Tennessee and Kentucky and UConn, Indiana. Maybe like that makes me think like, is Elmarco Jackson in it? And I know how you like to play these games. It's always like leading to your next point. You're going to be like, so? Like, you're going to be like, so? I mean, like, should Jank play 30 a night? Is that really what we're getting at here? So I'm going to go, DeJuan Harris has to be on the court.
Yes.
I'm assuming Kevin McCullar is on the court.
No.
You're not going to give me Kevin? Okay, wow. So this could be a good thing. Both those guys are out. Okay, Johnny Furphy.
Yes.
KJ Adams.
Yes.
Is this a small ball lineup? Would it be a small ball lineup? Is Marco Jackson a part of this lineup, Derek?
Nope.
Okay. I'm really just going to name every player on the roster.
I mean, you have like 3 players left you haven't named.
Jamari McDowell.
No.
Okay. Nicholas Timberlake.
Yes.
Okay, we're getting somewhere. And Parker Brown.
Yes, Parker Brown is the correct answer. So maybe circling back around.
How many minutes has this lineup played? We can't do this exercise without you telling me that.
Yeah, it's like 12 possessions or something like that. So not very much, but the net rating
12 possessions.
Out of curiosity, the net rating there is plus 13.5. And you might be wondering, okay, is that good? Is that bad? Here's a graphic which shows all of KU's lineups this year. And this is, some of the ones that have played even more possessions and minutes than that one necessarily. So like the Dewan, Elmarco, Kevin McCullar, KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson lineup, that one's plus 15.1. The Dewan, Timberlake, Kevin McCullar, KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson lineup, that one's plus 15.2. So it's a little bit above those, but I don't know, maybe not as big of a drop-off as you think, I guess.
Well, we'll find out. We'll find out because you're right. 12 possessions is what, like 10 minutes into a basketball game, if that. So we're going to find out exactly how potent this team can be. The thing is that is fascinating about it is it's not like, okay, Hunter's out, so this guy has to come in and kind of fill his role. There's nobody else. Like Parker, they're not going to feed Parker Brown in the post. They're not going to really feed KJ in the post.
All right, real quick, we got some breaking news, so I just want to touch on this at the end of while we're recording. Bill Self said Kevin McCullar will not play this week, but that's a positive too because everyone thinks that the time off will obviously help him. He will play in the NCAA tournament as well. So, I mean, obviously, if that were the case, that'd be good. But do you think that could just be posturing from Bill Self to make sure the committee doesn't ding them for not having him?
Bill Self savvy like that. Like he chooses his public statements very deliberately. Is this at Hawk Talk? Is this where he's talking about this?
Yes.
So I wonder if we're going to get an update on Hunter Dickinson as well, or maybe that'll be more of a, because with the Kevin stuff, it's a bone bruise. So like you're going to bang it, it's going to hurt worse. You're going to take some time off. It's going to feel better. You're going to come back. You're going to bang it again. It's going to hurt worse again. So like, it doesn't surprise me that he's going to come back because there's never really been any concern that it's like a structural issue with his knee. Hunter though, like the thing that's funny about that is like Hunter being out is a much bigger loss. It's a bigger loss. KU completely changes how they play, like we were just talking about. So I don't know, like, I don't even know if it would ding KU having Kevin out versus having Hunter out, where I do think like the committee would seriously have to consider that.
All right, he's Nick Schwert. I'm Derek Johnson. Give him a follow at Nick_Schwert. Myself at D Johnson Radio. We'll see you next time with Locked On Jayhawks.